welcome. I think this will be a really great discussion around the future of impact reporting. My name is Zak Kaufman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions. I am really passionate about this topic and excited to have really a conversation with you all about it today. You can see a code at the top for going to menti.com, and you can punch that code 61281340 into Menti, and that'll allow you to be part of the conversation. We're going to do a bunch of discussion and back and forth collaboratively to try to make this as interactive as possible. It's my first time running a Menti session, so bear with me if we have any hiccups. But yeah, look forward to get in with you. Alan, I'll let you quickly introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Zach. I'm Alan. I'm a director at Vera Solutions. Have been with Vera for 9 years. Speaking from São Paulo, Brazil right now. Super excited to be sharing with you all a little bit of this impact topic, which has been part of my life for the last 20-ish years. Yeah, we're excited and thanks for joining us. I see some friends here. Eric, Attain, and it's really good to see.
Great to see everyone. So let's kick it off. And once again, for Menti, you're going to menti.com. That's the code to punch in. If you want to use your phone and you're a QR code kind of person, you can use the QR code to get in there as well. I'll try to keep the code up there for the beginning of the session. I know we got a few people coming in from their coffee breaks or other beverage breaks, depending on where you're calling in from today. But excited to dive into this topic around the future of impact reporting. And really what we want to do is start to hear from you all about some of the challenges that you're facing as organizations, or seeing if you're coming as more of a solution provider or service provider. And then share a little bit of our stories in our journey, the challenges that we've seen in the organizations we've worked for and the organizations we've worked with. And then start to paint a bit of a picture about where we think the sector could go to make impact reporting a little bit less painful and a little bit more productive for everybody. So that's what we're going to dig into over this hour. Our first Menti question, you can kind of pin on the map where you're calling in from today, so we can get a little picture of where we all are. My dot looks a little bit further north than it actually is. I'm calling from Switzerland, just outside of Geneva, Switzerland. Alan mentioned he's coming in from São Paulo, Brazil. Expect we get a bunch of people in North America, given the time of day. Amazing. Keep them coming. Cool. And that's going to be the vibe of this session. It's just going to be, we're going to have quite a bit of interaction here, just to make sure we're all in it and having the conversation together. So great. Alan, looks like we're representing the rest of the non-American world here. So that'll be fun. A fun challenge for us, but there we go. Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thanks for that. Great to see everybody joining from around North America. Looks like we might have a few Canadians in the mix, and a mix of folks from around the States as well. So let's move on to our next question. So we're trying to get a lay of the land of who all's in our conversation today. So what best describes your organization that you're participating as? Like, let's get a sense of who we've got in the room. We got a bit of a mix, I hope, because this is a topic that is relevant to absolutely everybody here. So, and that you can certainly feel free to use the chat on Zoom as well if you want to just say hello, introduce yourself, where you're calling from. That's also an option. All right, we got a good healthy mix here. One loan funder. Excellent. Cool. It looks about like 50% so far, about 50% NGOs, a couple solution providers or service providers, and then a few others as well. So yeah, do feel free to kind of use the chat if we haven't captured a category, and that goes throughout the conversation today, right? So as we're having a conversation, if we're asking a question in a particular way and we've kind of missed the mark, right, just use the chat feed to help keep us honest. All right, good. We got a few more hitting the scales. Great. So good mix. I love seeing that we've got some solution providers here. I love seeing that we've got a good number of NGOs, folks from NGOs on the call as well. I think this is a topic that is super relevant across the board and really affects the whole sector. So I think some of the ideas that we have are really ones that we want to collaborate on with folks across all of these different segments. All right, now next one, before we get into some storytelling, tell us in a word or two or three, how does your team feel about impact reporting? How does your team feel about impact reporting?
Interesting.
There we go. Let's get the dirty laundry out here.
Yeah, now is the
Overwhelmed.
time. Now is the time to really think about our funder and how you feel when they're asking you to report.
Yeah, this is good. Oh, this is quite the cloud here. Tedious, overwhelmed, clueless. Okay. Tricky, necessary. Yeah, absolutely. Important. Painful. Someday. Complexity, elusive, costly, yep, disconnected. Absolutely. Investment and cost. Yep, kludgy. That's a fun one. And time consuming, right in the middle, which is I think a good place to take this from. Unsure. All right, great. So we got a good mix. We got a lay of the land of how everybody's feeling about impact reporting. I think what I'm seeing here is because there's a mix of like, hey, this is something that's really important. It's something that is critical for the sector, but it's also something that takes up a ton of our time. Or we may not be totally sure about what's expected. Maybe there's some growth needed from our organizations in this realm, and it's something that can be quite costly, both looking at the time that it takes as well as the actual costs that we need to that we need to spend around tools, software, pen and paper, whatever it is that we're using for impact reporting. So Alan and I want to share a little bit of our journeys briefly, just to kind of help set the stage here. In my journey, so I've been working at the intersection of technology and M&E, monitoring and evaluation, impact measurement, whatever you like to call it, for the last 16 years, kind of all around the globe. And I moved over to South Africa in 2008. And I was given a jump drive. I was working for an NGO that was growing quite quickly and about to get a big grant from the US government to scale up its program tenfold in South Africa. And we had programs around Southern Africa. And I was given a jump drive with the organization's data from the last 6 years. And because of the pressure of the new funding we were bringing on, we really needed to ramp up the team and specialize roles. And so I was kind of thrust into the role of monitoring and evaluation person. And running our M&E system. And what our M&E system looked like at the time was this. We had Excel spreadsheets. So in every local office, once a quarter, so every 3 months, the team would enter data into an Excel spreadsheet like this. But all the data was collected on paper. And so it was just, we had attendance sheets, we had questionnaires, all the data was just sat on paper, would go into the file cabinet. And then at the end of 3 months, they would pull it out of the file cabinet and enter it into a spreadsheet like this. And this has all sorts, we could spend all day kind of unraveling the things that are wrong with a spreadsheet template like this. We don't have individual level data. It's all counting. There's lots of room for error, et cetera. But basically, we were managing everything on a jump drive, and you had this process where one person at headquarters kind of compiled everything. So the way it looked was you had all these piles of paper and all the file cabinets in all of our program sites, and this is simplified, right? Like we had dozens of program sites. We had about half a dozen local offices. And so that data would then get entered into these spreadsheets once a quarter. The spreadsheets would then get sent via email into headquarters. And then every quarter would get compiled. All of them would get compiled, assuming that they got sent in. We chase them down and it would get compiled into this monster spreadsheet. And then we have one person sitting on top of this pyramid who's then responsible for answering all the questions and compiling the data to report to funders. Menti has little icons if you ever want to agree with something or thumbs up it, heart it or something. You feel free. It's on down on the right. On the bottom right. Maybe you've seen something like this, or maybe you've experienced something like this. This was the reality that I inherited in my monitoring evaluation role in 2008 was we need to report to a dozen different funders. And we had we had a system that had no feedback loops. So there was very little buy-in at the local level. And folks were saying it feels like we're being policed. Mistakes were getting made as the data was getting manually compiled. Data quality took a hit from that. And we never digitized any of the individual level data. Actually, we were just taking kind of those counts, right? So we were limited in the questions that we could answer based on the structure of our spreadsheets. And to boot, we needed to scale the program tenfold from 5,000 kids a year to 50,000 kids coming through, 50,000 kids a year coming through this health promotion program. So that was that was kind of the reality that I inherited in this NGO, and the way that the impact data that we had was flowing. Now we had Salesforce actually for all of our fundraising data, and I had this wacky idea at the time that, hey, maybe actually we could use Salesforce for tracking our program data and tracking our impact data, which a handful of organizations were doing around the globe, but was actually pretty novel back in 2008, 2009. And so we built out a solution that we called the scoreboard. We launched it. Everybody in the organization got access to it. We had dashboards like this that were kicking out so everybody could see how are we doing against our targets, how does that break down by sex, by age, how many kids are coming through the program right now, and so on. And so you went from this model where you had a kind of one-way flow of data from the program sites to the local office to the headquarters and then up to the various funders, with no feedback loops, right? To a model where actually everybody has access to the same information internally. And you could do this on Salesforce, you could do this on other platforms, but that was a game changer for this organization. Basically, everybody getting access to the organization's impact data and visibility on it was really, really powerful for the organization, and really unlocked a new culture and a new ways of working and new funding as well. For the organization that's enabled them to scale. They're 15 years later, they're still using this system. So that's great. But it doesn't solve all of the problems, right? And the other thing is we saw a lot of other organizations kind of came to us and said, hey, this is exactly what we need. How do we do this, right? So Vera Solutions was really born out of that. We grew out of this NGO, at some point helping other organizations kind of build better data systems, move beyond the mission of this NGO. And so we kind of started working with other organizations around the globe to help them go through that same kind of transformation. We've been at this for 14 years and worked with over 400 organizations. And if we can ever be helpful, we'd love to, but we're not actually really here to talk about that today. We want to talk about what's wrong with impact reporting, and how, if you think about the kind of system, the challenges that I was facing here, some of this is we can fix some of this up to the HQ level. What we were able to kind of fix quite a lot of this by building out a solution on the Salesforce platform. And Vera has also been able to help a lot of organizations improve data management kind of within the organization. But when it comes to then sharing your data out to your funders, to your other stakeholders, that's a different story. And it's really, as we saw in all of your feelings, it's very tedious, it's very time consuming, it's very complex, it's very costly, and it's a big challenge for the sector. So this is something that we've kind of run up against and realized, hey, the way we're working, the technologies we're using, they don't quite solve this big problem that's more sector-wide, that's more systemic. And we need to think about how, as a sector and as a community, can we address that? I'll hand over to Alan to talk a little bit about his journey, and maybe you'll see some commonalities.
Thanks, Zach. So Zach just mentioned like his journey first in one organization and mostly how to handle data internally. In my case, I think my focus was more since I started my career right like off the university, grassroots nonprofit organizations in Brazil, having to manage a small team with some programs in the field, and money coming from multiple funders and funders asking us to report back on what we were doing. So basically, lots of spreadsheets, PDF. Some actually did have their own databases that we would report directly on. Still very tedious work. You can imagine that we would have our own frameworks and our ways of collecting data with some set of indicators. But then funder one was asking things about a subset of those indicators, plus additional indicators that we were not collecting before, but then we had to start collecting for that purpose. So a lot of hours wasted or invested for the funder, but from an organizational perspective, very tough time. People only focusing on one specific things of putting things together and then reporting multiple places. Then after 10 years on the grassroots, I went to, in this case, to the Netherlands. I did work in a couple of other organizations in the US that we did both. We would get money from funders, but also grant money to a few grantees. I was pretty fortunate to, when I joined that organization, Vera Solutions, actually, I was a client of Vera before joining Vera, had just implemented a Salesforce-based system for us to collect all the data. So in that situation, I was in the middle. I was in the impact measurement team, responsible for both telling our funders what we were doing and how we were, what results were being done with the money that they were bringing to us. And again, same story around Excel sheets, PDFs going down. And then I could experience more or less what Zach had said in terms of, but now the opposite, like from a funder perspective, we would request from our grantees to report in one single platform. And what I heard from people who were previous to me, that was a game changer. And you can imagine as a funder, like everything coming through one system, same indicators we were requesting, but then the grantees themselves had that big challenge of, my funder 2 here is giving me money. I need to send a PDF document to them, and Women Win is funding me, and I will report through Salesforce. So all those challenges again. And then I joined Vera to help a little bit solve a few of those problems, of those challenges in 2015. So that's my journey. Back to Zach. Now we are getting into a little bit more granularity, and then some Menti questions coming up for us to interact a little bit more.
And I saw a little bit of chat coming through on Menti, which is fun to see. If you chat on Menti, it'll flash your chat up on the screen, which is cool. Someone was saying, please don't ask me to report through a PDF. I couldn't agree more, right? Like, it's on the one hand, okay, a PDF, you can kind of use whatever format you want, but nobody's going to use the data in a PDF, right? We can't make much use of that. And I think that's one of the things holding us back. Cool. So impact reporting, from my perspective, again, just like working in this space for the last 15 years, I think it's pretty clear that impact reporting is broken. If you were to parachute into Earth, from the outside and get into the nonprofit sector and look at how impact reporting works, or be able to design it from scratch, you would never design it to work the way that Alan just described, right? Like, or the system that I inherited way back when, where you're reporting manually to 12 different funders in different formats and different databases. It's incredibly siloed. It's really tedious, right? And I think most organizations would say, it's like doing your taxes, 10 times a year with different sets of forms and so forth, right? So there's a real opportunity here, I think, to change how this works, but it's going to take I think, buy-in from across the sector. I don't think it's like a if you build it they will come kind of thing. I don't think it's one organization can solve this, but I do have some ideas which we're excited to get into. But first, we want to get back to you all and get some input from you all. So especially if you're from an NGO, maybe if you're coming from a solution provider, put on the hat of maybe one of the organizations that you're working with. Where does your organization regularly report or share impact data to? Where's impact data flowing from this group? Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Keep moving. Keep it going.
So we see board and annual report in the lead, with funders coming after. That looks like it's going to be the 1, 2, and 3.
Look at that. So we got a lot of different demands on our impact data, right? Like, it's got to go in all these different places. It's different formats. We could add other categories here, right? Like, we work in international development, and some people are reporting their data up to International Aid Transparency Initiative. Some people report their data into put their data into GuideStar Platinum, for example, or GuideStar or some other registries like that. We can talk a little bit about that, but yeah, there's a lot of demands on our impact data. First and foremost, the board, getting the annual report done, but also complying with what funders expect, getting good data back to donors, and so on. Cool. What tools are you using? This is just open-ended, so let's kind of hear what are folks using. In our case, way back when, we were using pen and paper to begin with, and then compiling that with Excel. We shifted onto using mobile data collection via Open Data Kit, and obviously using Salesforce, Google Sheets. Cool. This might take a minute for people to type.
Yes.
Razor's Edge. All right. Keep it going. Excel. Power BI. Okay. Yeah. For managing, analyzing. Big mix. Survey platforms. Salesforce. Yep. Excel. Here it's coming in. Every action. please JSON. Yeah, JSON would be nice, so then we can share it a little bit better. PowerPoints, that's fun. SurveyMonkey, Monday.com for impact data. That's a different one. Zoom. Okay. Cool. Dynamics. Great. So there's a ton of diversity. We got 44 responses here. Great. So there's a ton of diversity. Salesforce, Excel, Google Sheets seem to be kind of leaders. Smartsheet as well. Looks like a few folks are using that. So there's a ton of diversity. Part of the point here is clearly like we're just using a wide range of different tools, and at the center of most of it is Google Sheets and Excel. And I will tell you, I use Excel and Google Sheets all of the time. They are wonderful tools for so many things, right? But one of the challenges is they don't have they don't inherently have a consistent structure, right? And you run into some of the same problems that I ran into back in South Africa, and that you're really limited to the questions that you can ultimately answer. But also, if you're trying to share data via Excel, right, like you're going to find it quite limiting, because people can kind of just break the Excel and track whatever they want or structure it however they want. Okay, cool. So a lot of diversity in the tools we're using. Alan, I'll let you jump in with a question here.
Yeah, so for this one, we are very interested in knowing what formats do your funders require your impact reports in. I think for folks who don't have funders, feel free to think about one organization that you know of and use that one for your answer. So this is the nightmare. Please don't make me do this in a PDF. Let's see if they still exist or if there are platforms out there. If it's a shared central platform by multiple funders. So yeah, basically we have the documents and then on custom portal for the funder themselves, and then licensed software. Well. Yeah,
that's something that's kind of picked up, I think, in the last decade, right? Of different tools, multiple of these. Yeah, hopefully you can select many. I think we can figure it out. Cool.
I wonder why we don't have this central shared platform used globally, Zach. Why?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's something that, yeah, I was keen to hear to see that, right? Because I think this is something where there's a lot of potential in that concept, but there isn't really anything that's there isn't anything yet that's widely good. That's widely adopted, and I think that poses the challenge, but also kind of the opportunity. Okay, so funders portals and documents, because kind of similar to the experience that Alan and I were sharing. Cool. All right. How many hours?
One more.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one more. How many hours per year does your organization you think spend on impact reporting? This is our dream, to solve for that and to try to reduce that as much as we can.
Okay, so some people it's not as huge of a burden. For some people it's over 200 hours being spent each year on this. I mean, I think for some organizations, the annual report alone, no process in place. Okay. Well, no process in place can also produce a lot of time spent on it as well, right? Okay, interesting though. Yeah, so we've got so clearly there's just a lot of time being spent being spent across the organizations on the call here in terms of managing collection of data, consolidation of data, and then ultimately sharing and getting the data out to the folks that need it. All right. So last one before we get back to a couple slides from our end. So what's the biggest challenge that you currently face with impact reporting? What is a challenge that you currently face with impact reporting? And from here I'll try to shift into a bit of like forward looking and think about what might be a better way that things could work. Great. Trying to report on impact when the organization doesn't have a coherent theory of change or clear program goals. Absolutely. Nomenclature, right? Inconsistent nomenclature and terminology. Many funders for one nonprofit, too many custom reporting platforms for similar data. Yes, exactly. So like we've all experienced this, right? Like we need to take the same data and report it here, report it there. And it's tedious, right? And often funders aren't using the platforms for everything that they could be, especially if they're just getting data in like PDFs, right? Department A has to send data to Department B, who writes copy for Department C to send to funders, and Department D writes the marketing copy. Yeah, that's well summarized, right? So it has to go through all these different hands, and all these different filters, right? Meaningful metrics. These are great inputs. Meaningful metrics that tell what we accomplished. So there's some themes here around not having kind of the frameworks or the metrics necessarily defined or in place. Lack of universal standards for outcome management. Absolutely. I hear that from a lot of folks. Translating different formats into a consistent format. Yeah, a ton of time gets spent on just manipulating data from its source into the structure that we need to manage it, into the format that funders need to process it, without a doubt. Accessing all data from all programs, different reporting systems, without a doubt. We're working with some big international NGOs, and if you're coming from a smaller organization, maybe it can give you some peace to know that this is something that's experienced by very large organizations as well, right? And we definitely are seeing a trend towards larger organizations trying to simplify their technology to stop having a zillion different tools, because it creates a lot of headaches. Alan, anything you want to call out here?
Sure, I thought how many outliers should actually get more attention. I think that's something that is part of my own experience, and I think it's interesting.
Yeah, great stuff. Cool. Thanks for the inputs. We'll open for kind of more like broader discussion a little bit. So let's come back to kind of this challenge that we're facing, right? So it's clear, and hearing all the input from you, it definitely resonates. It resonates very well that that impact reporting is broken. There's a huge opportunity in front of us to try to change how impact reporting works in the sector. And I think that's I think that it's a challenge to all of us, but I think the opportunity when it comes to time saving and headache saving is huge. So if we try to unpack what I think the kind of main backbone problems are. So one is there's no agreed upon data standard. So we could talk about that a little bit, but there's a lot of people that say like, oh, we need to get everybody to agree on the same frameworks and the same indicators. That would be great. Like in 10 years, that'd be awesome. But like, can we first get people to agree on what is an indicator? What is a result? Like, what is a story? Like, what are the data points that need to be captured in the common pieces? We have some ideas. I think you see, if you dig into the data models of different software solutions, you'll see a lot of commonality. I'm quite encouraged. We have a tool called AMP Impact, and if you map it against the Microsoft Common Data Model, our tools on Salesforce, their tool, that's the Microsoft Common Data Model. You've got tools like B.World in the Microsoft ecosystem that use the Common Data Model from Microsoft. They're really kind of the same. They're very close to the same data model, right? And you could definitely kind of work within them, but there isn't kind of an accepted data standard. The second, and this is rung through a lot of the comments that we've heard, is that impact reporting is funder centric, right? And so we've got different asks from different funders. We need to show our best foot forward to funders, and the marketing department's kind of controlling that narrative and the look and feel of it. And so that's kind of the second problem, that organizations are not really kind of controlling the picture. And that's one of the drivers why, if you look across the sector, you'll see about 150 million hours are spent on impact reporting per year. It might be a little bit harsh to say that all of them are wasted, but I do think that we could cut down the amount of time spent and drive up the amount of value achieved with some better connected tools in the sector. The third big problem is around siloed and dead data. So we talked about this a little bit, but data that goes into a PDF is going to die in the PDF, right? Like, it's not really data. It's just like it's almost like an image at that point, right? You can't use it as structured data. Somebody was saying, please use JSON, right? In terms of structuring their impact data. We need data to get into a digital format if we want to be able to kind of get it between platforms and get it between systems. Fourth, and this is the biggest time suck, is the manual consolidation. There was a comment in the last slide that someone shared around just getting the data from all these different sources, right? And that's, I think, probably the biggest time suck for a lot of organizations, is getting that source data, reformatting it, and then rearranging it, analyzing it, and then formatting it in the way that funders need. And then the last bit, I think, under kind of resulting from a lot of these, is just lack of trust due to data quality issues. And I think the main issue around that is there's no pressure. There isn't that much pressure to do data quality audits, for example, right? I think in a lot of ways, a lot of impact data in the sector is kind of this house of cards, and folks are afraid to ask the hard questions around data quality because they know folks are already really burdened by the amount of effort, that goes into impact reporting. So these are kind of these 5 problems, and I don't think we can kind of flip a switch and fix all of them, but I think there's some opportunities, and this idea that I've been talking to a bunch of people about and kind of batting around for a little while now is imagining a world where we have an API-centric hub for sharing impact profiles. So impact profiles could be project level or program level or organization level. Impact profiles might have metrics or KPIs. They'd have results. We could see the location of that data. We can make sure it speaks to the different data models that exist across the sector, whether that's as I mentioned, like Microsoft Common Data Model and B.World, AMP Impact on Salesforce, Up Metrics, or but also in other tools, but also looking at GMS tools on the funder side of things. So Flux and Submittable and other Salesforce-based grant making systems. There's this barrage of different platforms, and the biggest, I think, one of the biggest shames in the sector right now is that they don't speak to each other. It's not easy to get data from one tool to another tool. The other thing is that some of us are just using spreadsheets, right? And some of us are just using mobile data collection tools like Kobo Collect or Open Data Kit or Comcare. And so part of what's needed here is actually the ability to kind of ingest that data from whatever structure it might have and structure it into a consistent structure that can speak to the funder's system, that can speak to the various data tools, right? So we think of this, I like to think of this as kind of like Strava for impact data. So I'm a distance runner. It's no mystery to anybody who knows me. I run about like 6 days a week, and I track all my runs on my watch, right? And very few people who use Strava actually track an activity itself on Strava. They'll track it on their Apple Watch or their Garmin watch or their Coros watch, on some sort of wearable technology. And all of those different tools connect into Strava, and Strava is the platform that everybody uses to then share. Just about everybody uses, millions and millions of people use to share their bike rides and their runs and their walks and their hikes with folks, with their friends, with their teammates, with their coaches, and so forth. And I think it's an interesting analogy, right? Strava has a consistent data structure for fitness activities, and all these different tools, they might have slightly different data structures, but if they can map into the Strava structure, then that opens up this data sharing place. And Strava's not trying to be the best wearable technology on the market at all. They're not trying to compete with Garmin or any of these other players. They're trying to connect and integrate with all these different tools so that whatever you're doing to track your activity, you can bring it in here and use Strava to then find other people and connect with other people and share your data with other people. And so this is sort of the concept that we've been noodling around, right? In terms of like, what would it look like if the sector had a tool like this? And it might look something like this, that you can kind of search and filter down to kind of find profiles for organizations that you're interested in, or projects that you're interested in. There'd be extensive kind of tagging behind this that would help to kind of look by SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, or look by different populations served, or look by geographies to find, again, organizations or impact profiles that you might be interested in. An impact profile could have a mix of narrative and story data. You could bring multimedia into it. You could kind of feature certain KPIs that really showcase a project or showcase a program. And you could allow a certain amount of actually just like visualization within a platform like this, but also the ability to then download the data and do more with it, or connect it via the API, connect it to your grant management system if you're a funder, or your monitoring evaluation system if you're an implementer. And you could collect your data in whatever tool and bring it into a platform like this, right? Like the idea being that you could ingest data from tools like Kobo or Google Sheets or Comcare, wherever it might be, and be able to structure it in a consistent way so that folks could access it. The other key thing, and you may kind of look at this and say like, oh yeah, but we have IATI, or we have GuideStar Platinum, or we've got various other tools, but it falls apart a little bit, right? Like the level of granularity that your funders that our funders need, like around impact data, goes far and above like what gets published on let's say GuideStar or the existing platforms. And additionally, the existing tools are all public or bust, right? And really what we need the ability as organizations in the sector, we need the ability to share publicly if we want to, or to share privately if that's what we want. And so that's kind of the concept that we're kind of working on. So broadly, putting on the hat of an implementer, right? The current way of working that we've seen or the old way, hopefully in the future, is, we spend days on our funding reports. We manually aggregate and consolidate data. We're rarely sharing impact, but it's a huge effort when we do. And then like our annual reports, for example. And a new way, right? If we had a hub like this, a new way could be that funders, instead of saying, hey, report into our portal, or hey, give us this PDF once a quarter, they could just subscribe to your impact profile, right? And maybe there's some trade-offs that they would have to make. Maybe they'd have to, accept that like you're tracking these metrics in a particular way. But you know what? Like by accepting that, they're not burdening you with further reporting, and you're going to be able to achieve more as an organization, right? And they're going to get monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Thanks. They're going to get data on a closer to real-time basis if a profile like this is connected to the tools that are used week to week and day to day. It would be the ability to automatically ingest from Mel tools, right? Integrate and ingest from Mel tools. So that might be a monitoring evaluation tool that's used on the ground point of service to collect individual data, right? And be able to bring that up into an aggregate structure that can then be shared, because none of us are going to share individual level data with folks across the sector. That raises all sorts of data protection problems. What we're talking about is sharing narrative, multimedia, and indicator data. Cool. And then the last one is around kind of making it easier to share data, right? So reducing the effort involved in the sharing part of this process. For funders, so putting on the funder hat, right? The current process, you're waiting for data for 6 months, you're chasing after late reports, constantly, and you're introducing quite a bit of burden for the NGOs that you're funding, right? The organizations that you're funding. With a hub like this, right, you'd be getting real-time or closer to real-time updates and better insight. You'd be notified when profiles that you're following are updated, or you could get kind of a stream that could come to your email or something like that. And you could save a ton of time for the organizations that you're funding, right? So it's not, again, there's no kind of flip a switch, this will work, but in order for it to work, it would need to speak to the wide range of technologies that are used across the sector, and it would require a certain amount of adoption across the sector. That's maybe getting us started, but I'd love to hear from everybody else. Like, what would it take for this kind of platform to get adopted? What would it take for organizations to adopt a central integrated platform for sharing impact data? An act of God. There we go. Buy-in from higher ups. State and federal funders. Yeah, I'm here. We got some government funded folks, and I know the expectations on that. They would probably be late adopters of a platform like this. Funding, yeah, definitely funding for a platform like this, or if you're another solution provider, right? The impetus to be able to integrate and do that integration work is important. Funder adoption, totally agree. Miracle, yeah. So we got some HIPAA compliance. Okay, if it wasn't tracking individual level data, it probably wouldn't. We have to, yeah, that's fair. Funders have to require it. Totally agree, right? Like it requires a little bit of a change in the way funders work. And having worked with a number of funders, and as somebody who, unfortunately and painfully at times, is perpetuating part of this problem, because we're helping funders build a really good portal that structures impact data well, so they can get good insight from it and keeps it as simple as it can be for the NGOs that are reporting in. It's still siloed, right? And until we get a platform like this, I think that's going to keep being a problem. Yeah.
We have security. Yeah, we have security on data, which is, yeah, like, am I really going to put my data into this platform? Where is it going to land? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's not only is it safe there, but also who is it being shared with? Is it me selecting who am I sharing with this, and which part of my projects or my programs?
Amen. Yeah, having control over that. I think that's got to be a key tenet of a platform like this. If it was to, yeah, funders agreeing on metrics. I think that's interesting, right? Because if you're going to have one profile that funders are subscribing to, then yeah, like they would need to kind of buy into, okay, these are the metrics that an organization is using. One of the things that I like about the concept, if you sort of fast forward and somehow that act of God or that miracle happened and this was adopted at scale, it would totally change the dynamic of getting funding, I think, because a funder can just see, this profile would be your LinkedIn, the equivalent of your LinkedIn profile when applying for a job. this profile then says, it shows the funder, like, here's what we're tracking and how we're tracking it. Oh, you want us to track a different metric? Okay, well, like, there's cost in that, right? There's effort in that, and you can have a kind of clear and honest conversation about that. Whereas I think right now the expectation is a little bit of a funder says jump and we say how high. Cool. Who owns the data? Absolutely. Who contracted standards about who else sees and uses the data? Yeah. Release of information. Cool. Yeah. So I think the theme around data protection is a key theme, or data privacy and control is one key theme here. And then the other key theme I think is funder buy-in that I'm seeing from folks. And then maybe there's a theme of like maybe the sort of miracle and act of God comments. So cool. Yeah, so funders want to see impact from their grant period, which are all different. Yeah, I've seen this issue too. I think this is an interesting point, right? And I do think I also think that a platform like this, once adopted, right, could allow visibility on for the funder on like, okay, what's the net impact on the organization of me asking them to do it this way or do it that way? Because I think oftentimes funders maybe not know that. Yeah. Cool. A lot of trust building with funders. Yeah. Which one of the things that's great though is there is this kind of movement for more trust-based philanthropy. So maybe the buy-in isn't so far away. So some of the prerequisites, right? Like clearly you all have named a bunch of important considerations and what it would take. And that may touch on kind of the next question that we'll ask too. But one of the key things is getting to just an agreed upon data standard, or agreed enough data standard for managing things like indicators, results, locations, and so on. I actually think we're not as far away from this as some might say. I think we are very far away from the sector agreeing on what indicators to use, but I actually don't think that we're that far away from agreeing on what is an indicator. So I actually think that one may be solvable. I think the platform needs to be super friendly and open, central, but also it needs to be easy to kind of search and filter, to follow profiles, but also to control how you're sharing and who you're sharing with. And clearly, there's a lot of important questions raised around, who owns the data, how's data protection going to be managed there. And then adoption, I think the theme that was coming from the input from you all was really around that it needs to come from the top. If it comes from the top, then that'll drive adoption among implementers, which is encouraging to hear. If it doesn't come from the top, right, like it's not going to where's the pressure to use a platform like this? So I think that's a key tenet to achieving adoption. I think what adoption looks like is that organizations are not just updating the profile to tick the box, but actually we've shifted to a reality where it's actually less work to just connect it to your tools, and have a process that takes 80% less effort, right, but requires a little bit more transparency with your stakeholders. And so, yeah, I think the point around trust and understanding that like it's not all sailing into the sunset. We're solving really hard problems. I think that's a key piece to it. Cool. Alan, you want to take this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other piece that we thought would be interesting to get you all to discuss about is what would it get in the way of the sector adopting a central integrated platform for sharing impact data? So we saw a little bit on the other one, like what we need now, what are the barriers? What are the things that you all folks think that we need to be careful with when we were thinking about that? Great. Human nature, budget, and other priorities. Yeah, I think for both sides, right? For the grantees and for the grant makers and for the funders. Analysis, cultural, yeah, that's important. So what goes on in one specific place? What are the differences between geographies, between cultures? Fear of change, absolutely. Who likes to change? None of us usually.
Yep.
Privacy again, yeah, coming. Okay, yeah, depending on what type of data we are collecting, right? We know that we don't want our data around, but when it's like medical data and individual data, then it gets even harder. Yeah, so a bunch of other.
I've seen a comment in Zoom as well from Valerie saying that we have preliminary data that needs to get reviewed, and so you wouldn't necessarily want to release it straight away. There would need to be you need to have the means of sort of opening it up, right? So maybe some of the data is like live and published, but you need the ability to like keep some of it, locked down until it's reviewed and ready, which is, I think, is a great point.
There's one here, feel there is a need for unique attributes from the data. That's interesting. And I think it's related to this understanding that Zach brings, right? So how do we make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of what these mean? And then going a little bit further, the uniqueness of some of the attributes that may or may not be there.
Yeah. I think like multiple funders requiring multiple measures. I think part of how it could work, right, is, and again, this isn't me having all the answers. That's why we're really enjoying this session, right? Because these are big, challenging questions to wrestle with, right? But multiple funders requiring multiple measures, I think on a platform, if it was designed the right way, you could always spin up a new profile, right? There's an administrative effort required to managing multiple profiles. But if a funder was giving you a big grant, let's say to start a new project, you could set up a profile, for that project, and that could be like a private one that you just share with that funder. Might be one way to solve it if you can't negotiate with the funder to say like, hey, actually, like, we've got this profile, just subscribe to this one. But yeah, I think it is this balance of trying to steer towards a less cumbersome process.
I thought it was interesting just to read the deduplication piece, and it reminds me of something that we discuss a lot in impact reporting, which is the data quality, right? Like poor data in, poor data out, poor information out, as you will. I don't think this platform would solve for that, right? Like it would help connect where things are, but still like the rigor on collecting the data and understanding what data is being collected and what you are putting into the system, that doesn't change. I think.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple other interesting points here. The point around flexibility, I think, is important, right? Because I think for a platform like this to work, there needs to be a fair amount of trade-off in flexibility. And so I think the flexibility probably lives more in like Strava. Exactly, just come back to that example. It's not very flexible, right? Like it's I have the same user experience that everybody else has. But it's very powerful for sharing because everybody's got the same structure, and the APIs are wide open. There's more flexibility in Garmin Connect, because I can control what I look at and how I monitor stuff on Garmin or on other tools. And I think the same could apply here, right? It's not going to this wouldn't, I don't think, for most organizations, replace the need for data collection tools, data management tools, but it could become the vehicle for kind of sharing that data out. And so I think this other point up here around not adding another step between collecting data and another reporting platform, that's the key, right? So I think it's if you can get funders to kind of buy into this in mass, that could be that kind of trigger, that game changer that allows us to actually have, okay, by getting it here, instead of 10, we now have reduced to like 2 different places we need to report data. So that's kind of the.
On Zoom, there is an interesting one. How do we communicate to and get data from non-internet users? And I think the central platform connecting might help. Yes, the person might be able to do a lot of stuff offline, and then at some point in time, they would need to connect. But without that, so I agree that this is like it's.
And this point around retraining tech challenge staff, right? It's another tool to learn, right? And it's not, it needs to be pretty simple if there's going to be a platform like this, and folks obviously need to learn it. And I think a good theme cutting through here is around privacy concerns, deduplication. We got some good old monitoring evaluation folks in the house, which is always good to see. It's a big challenge, I think, for lots of organizations, and if a platform could provide some solution for that. And deduplication happens when we get from individual level data to aggregate data, right? So we actually built some of that into AMP Impact, where you can aggregate data up from any data structure to an indicator and a result in AMP Impact. And so we're kind of seeing the potential of that, and we're starting to see some organizations adopting that. Also, for better or worse, it's on Salesforce, right? And Salesforce isn't the right platform for everybody for everything, right? And so we're kind of restricted in that case to only being able to aggregate data that's on or connected to Salesforce, whereas a platform that is a little bit more free, like this, and not reliant on one particular platform, you could connect different kinds of data sources and deduplicate if you got it to be smart enough. Okay, great inputs. This is a really rich conversation. So last question, and then the floor will be open for other inputs that folks may have. How do you think impact reporting will be different in 2029? How do you think it'll be different from in 5 years? How do you think it'll be different from how it is now? And try to put on your optimistic hat. You don't have to buy into like this platform changing everything. I can't promise the platform will exist or get widely adopted, but I'm curious to hear what people think in terms of how impact reporting could be different 5 years from now, given all the pain that we're experiencing now. AI, more unified, still behind, hopefully better. Done by robots, so AI, clear theme there. Keep them coming. Less manual. Cleaner and easier. Required more frequently.
Augmented intelligence, can the AI there.
Mm-hmm. Give you another 30 seconds. More real time. That's clearly a theme here. Less manual. More unified, more automated, more real time, cleaner and easier. We got some optimism in the room here.
Yeah.
Technology has played, has brought us a good long ways over the last decade. If you look back to when Alan and I started this journey, right? Like it was all, for me, it was all pen and paper, right? And the tedious amount of work in aggregating that up, the data quality issues there. Tools like, free open source tools like Open Data Kit and Cobol Collect and whatnot, even just using, web form tools, if you're with an audience that has kind of internet connection, we've got Menti too, right? Like for this kind of collaborate, we're doing a lot of learning on this session as well, right? So, I think we've come a long ways, and I think we've solved a lot of challenges in the impact measurement world. But I do think we're butting up against the ceiling a little bit here by only being able to solve challenges within our sphere, within our organization. And so I think what I'm seeing and hearing from folks is we kind of need that buy-in from funders to a vision like this, that can then help create the opportunity for time saving across the sector, help centralize, simplify, clean, consolidate. And if we do that, and if we get a consistent data structure, data standard adopted, right, that creates the vehicle for AI, for AI to really do its thing. I think that this is, a lot of people talk about kind of, AI is going to change everything in impact measurement, and I think it can, but like we're quite far away from highly practical applications that are really accessible for the majority of organizations. And set up in a fairly turnkey way. And part of the problem there is that there's just so much diversity in how we're structuring our data, how we're collecting our data, the tools that we saw earlier that are being used. Alan, anything else you wanna call out?
Nope, that's it. No.
Okay. Cool. A lot of good ideas. Great. So thanks everybody for joining. This has been a really fun conversation for us. We've got a few minutes left for kind of open discussion, but we want to just share our contact information here if you want to get in touch with us. As I said, we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the solutions. We can't wave the magic wand. But this is a topic we're really passionate about. It is something we're committed to working on and trying to make better. And it's also, an area that we have been working on for the last 15 years. So we've learned a little bit, and again, work often every day, with hundreds of organizations around systems to kind of better manage their data. So if we can be helpful on that front, or if you want to, noodle around on this idea with us, we'd love to chat with you. We're looking for kind of organizations that can help shape the concept, or organizations, to be honest, that can kill the concept and say, hey, this is a terrible idea. Don't even bother, or it already exists and you should just go use this other thing. Because that's sort of where we're at in our thinking. Alan, anything you want to add to closing thoughts here, as we've got just a couple minutes left?
I think we saw a few negative things in all of this, but I just as you said a little bit before, like the sector in general has evolved, and I think now we are at a time that everyone, all the stakeholders that need to do impact, from funders to grassroots organizations, everyone in the middle, they understand that this has to be better and easier. So the pain is there, and it takes like the whole community to really drive the change and to continue talking to each other and to try to make this a little bit better and easier. So I think that the need is there, and I would just invite all of us to continue the effort that we've all been doing in our areas to make these happen easier.
Amen.